culture and the needs that we have in terms of changing that culture in the long run, if there is going to be a significant population of Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah, and I think it really, especially in the modern culture, it really does seem impossible to really do what is necessary when it comes to imposing certain ideas, right? The fact is that the current culture of Palestinians is not fit for civilization. I mean, we see it. Most of the Arab states are simply not sort of the states in a way we think about, right? Like the worst European country, as bad as it is, there is a certain sort of like understanding of law. There is a certain understanding of democratic process. But whenever all the Arab states, they do not have it. And there needs to be certain ideas. People need to hold certain ideas to basically have sort of like a proper civilized society. And so my questions for you, Anders, would be like, how can we, how, like, my question would be like, what would this re-education even look like? Like, we do not like from the start Palestinians were always innocent, right? Since October 7 it was always Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. It's never about Palestinians. So what are we even like trying to re-educate about if we don't even consider that they have done anything wrong? Or are we gonna re-educate Hamas? Is that what we're focusing? No, like we are focusing on Palestinians, yet we have never blamed them for anything. Anders?
Well, so I mean, I don't disagree with what James just said, but I think I'm a little bit more optimistic. Um, I think so. When it comes to the re-education, I mean, Hamas obviously has to go. So we're assuming that in any occupation scenario that Hamas is gone, right? And Israel is ruling the strip. And then when it comes to re-education, I still think there are a number of options you can do there. So if we think about it, and we shouldn't underestimate the youth. Yes, they are indoctrinated and by their parents and by their schools and so on and so forth. But kids are also by nature attracted to Western civilization, you know. And so if you start an education process, and I mean, there would be, I can see a lot of different options here. You know, you have kids there, you offer them scholarships to Israeli universities. And don't forget too that, I mean, for a period of time, you probably need to seal off the strip, but as soon as possible, you know, you need to start allowing people to go into Israel for work and so on and so forth, and just exposing them to what's on the other side of that border. You know, young adults and kids, yeah, they may have been indoctrinated at home, but we know here in the US, you know, kids rebel against their parents' demands for them to go to church, and kids rebel. And I think Western civilization would win out. And don't forget about the fact that there are how many? 2 million Arabs living in Israel today. I mean, is that a huge problem? Are they putting their kids in religious schools to oppose the state of Israel? Yeah, I know we're 75 years later, but you know, these are people, these are individuals, and we share the same human nature. So I'm probably a little bit more positive at. I don't think you need to direct necessarily by force how to educate these Palestinian kids. I think you should have a lot of voluntary options of setting up schools and creating alternatives in the strip, and you know, of everybody who is concerned here can start to pitch in, and I don't think there would be a shortage of money, quite frankly. So create a competitive environment education wise, and then slowly start to open up options of for these people to go into Israel for work, for schooling, maybe other Arab countries, maybe other Western countries. You know, it's not like we're sealing off this area for the duration.
As much as I hate not being the optimistic one, when I look at sort of the young people, especially in America, I don't necessarily see that sort of Western, sort of pro-Western ideas, especially if we look at the universities. And I think there are two things, because I'm trying to remember sort of like the occupation of Germany and Japan, right? And I think one thing that we truly lack here is the defeat of Palestinianism, right? Is the fact that yeah, I think once you once you like crush that spirit, then you can have the Marshall Plan, and then you can have the sort of building schools in Japan. But the fact is that the Palestinians haven't been defeated, and if Israel simply just tries to build, I think we are sort of like back to after 67, where yeah, okay, some Jews are going into Gaza, but we leave Palestinians alone. We don't interact with them. They are basically living in an enclave. They are sort of like living separately. So I think there needs to be something much harsher, something, basically showing them that they screwed up. Like, you cannot do October 7 and all the past events and then come out of there like nothing happened. Um, one, yeah, I mean, yes, Stuart, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I really want to believe in Anders' vision. I mean but I share some of your skepticism. I think in a better world, if the West were clearer on our values, then I think Anders is right. In any battle between the values of Western civilization and Palestinianism, lots and lots of young people are going to be attracted to the Western values. But the problem is that our own young people are not being taught the value of Western values. We're largely apologetic for them, and so I don't know that it would be enough to turn the tide. One thing I think might be worth, I mean, I'm extremely reluctant to, force education on kids, but, I think in this case, it might be what has to happen when you see, interviews with 5-year-olds that have, that are already fully convinced that, that it's okay to kill Jews. They've just been completely bludgeoned with this ideology. I think, the fact is that, I forget the exact number. There's like 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. And, most of them are peaceful people. And there's plenty of peaceful sects of Muslim and peaceful mullahs, whatever. Bring some of those in, so that they're not like, they don't feel, oh, this is somebody else's ideology being enforced on us. This is a different outlook of our own religion. And maybe that would help them to turn away from the radical Islam. I think that's probably more realistic than expecting them to be, full-on embracers of Western civilization. I don't know. I think that until the West is clearer on its values and really goes after Islamic totalitarianism, I think that we're just unlikely to ever fully resolve this problem.
Yeah, so I mean, there are sort of few parts playing there. Now, when it comes to sort of occupation of Arabs in the region, we know it already happened, and we know it worked to an extent, right? The fact is, Arabs in Israel are full-on citizens. They have all the rights as everybody else. Now, I don't think the sort of Arab problem is fully solved in, as with a lot of minorities oftentimes. The fact is that you still have the so-called the Arab parties, which are explicitly calling for destruction of Israel, either through communist lens or through an actual Islamist lens. So there is still that problem there. But sort of to get them at least to that extent of basically not actively wanting to kill Jews, I think can be even imposed by Israel. Now, I see we have a lot of, how do you say, Cypriots or Cypriots in the chat from Cyprus saying that we do not want them here. So I can understand that. Even when I heard that, to me, it sounded a bit sort of absurd. The fact is, I think Cyprus is a nation of less than 1 million, moving hundreds of thousands of Palestinians there. Let's say even if it's 100,000, that's pretty incredible, not to mention how expensive would that be. And that brings me to sort of the second part of it, is talking about the temporary solution. Now, temporary solution until what? Until we establish a two-state solution? Temporary solution until they all go back into Gaza, and then we go back to status quo? Israel will occupy? Are they going somewhere else? We do not hear pretty much anything from there. And this is always the problem, is the fact that we don't even know what would come after. Even when Trump talked about, I think earlier, that that potentially all Gazans would leave temporarily, let's say to Egypt or somewhere. The fact is, and then come back. I mean, we haven't solved anything. We just moved people around, hoping that it changes something. But James, I mean, what do you make of this being sort of like the temporary solution? The question is like, temporary solution to what? We need a permanent solution for once.
This is why for a very long period of time, Razi was going to debate me on whether or not we should have occupation or deportation. And for a long time, I was up for the idea because, like Anders, I thought, look, a real occupation, with at least some changes to the educational system there, some, establishing something better that the Gazans and Gazan children could see might work, but it would be a mighty effort, At this point, with the considerations that we've been talking about here today, the West does not have its ideological act together. The real big difference between the 1940s and today is how far the West has declined in its ideological standards, in its educational standards. And another big difference is Germany and Japan themselves, not only had they been psychologically defeated, there were differences of opinion underneath the surface that could be exploited. I do not see either of those factors on the table yet. Voluntarily done, but the serious consideration, why it is a serious consideration in my mind, and why I would no longer necessarily debate Razi on that point, is precisely all these changed factors between the 1940s and those countries and today, and the situation we find ourselves in. But look, if we don't have the will to smash Iran, how are we going to have the will to relocate Palestinians? But man, in the meantime, I would so encourage the floodgates to open and get that 50%. Let's hope that you get that 50% that would want to voluntarily leave and go elsewhere, because the security of Israel is right now the main concern for Israelis, as it ought to be. And frankly, it should be a concern for the United States insofar as they have a real selfish interest in a resolution. And we do. Remember, there were Americans who were taken hostage and killed on October 7th. Remember, Iran, which is behind all of the attacks on Israel, was, however soon they were going to get it or not, they have really scary missiles, and they were at least attempting to get nuclear weapons. That is an intolerable situation. If we can't smash that regime, then what kind of will do we have in the West to do something else? It seems that the West hasn't gotten its act together. Until the West gets its own ideological act together, we're really in a tough spot. So in the meantime, let's open up the voluntary floodgates for people to leave Gaza if they want to leave. And if you've got half the population, a roughly 2 million person population,
Absolutely,
wanting to leave, that could dramatically make it safer and make Israeli occupation, at least, of the remaining million a lot easier to manage and pull off. Although you'd be left with the hardcores who are absolutely hell-bent. If California went to a dictatorship, as I keep using the comparison, I was born and raised in this state, but I got no problem changing up. If California really became significantly worse than it is now, I would leave. if these people don't want to leave,
Yeah, because you can't
a
leave.
place that's rubble
The
right now,
Gazans can't
and
leave.
they're comparing it to the Nakba of the late 1940s,
won't
as they
let
call
them.
it, catastrophe of the 1940s, then what they're doing is existing for the sake of killing Jews. And that's the
That's what they're
hardcore
there for now.
population that you'd be left with. But it would be at least, you'd get the more innocent ones out, and it would be at least more manageable. Let me put it that way. So open the gates, let them go. Any place they can get the heck away from there. That seems like at least a step one in the right direction.
Yep. Get them
We have
out.
a super chat from Bonnie, thank you so much. A super chat from Apollo Zeus, thank you so much. A super chat from Jonathan, thank you so much. And one more super chat from Jonathan, thank you so much. Let me remind people that today's episode of The Daily Objective is sponsored by The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy, new book from Zoltan Sendes. If you are an objectivist, if you're a scientist, or both, or neither, and are interested in those topics, you can find out more about it in this book. It's inspired a little bit by the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So the book has 42 chapters where he talks about the meaning of life as well as everything on Earth. So check out that book
Sounds like a
on
good
Amazon.
buy.
Link to that is in the chat and in the description. And I believe it's still on sale, specifically on Kindle, for just $1. So make sure to check
I'll put
that
a link
out.
to this video
And yeah, so sort of, I mean, continuing,
into the chat
it's
so you can actually
one of the things that really disappoints
So
me, or
follow these
disappoints me,
guys.
scares me the most when it comes to sort of like finding a solution to this conflict, is the fact that the war from the start hasn't been fought properly, right? It was never about the Palestinian ideas, it was never about Palestinians, it's always about Hamas. So even the third part of this,
sure if
what's
it's
supposed to
gonna
happen,
work
is
very well.
reduce Hamas control. And that again basically gives in to the fact that basically we consider Palestinians simply just some sort of hostages who Hamas took over, Hamas is using as human shields. But as long as we separate, the victims from their abusers, then we can figure this out. We have a super chat from Dan. Thank you so much. He says, really appreciate the live podcast in Boston back last week, and he sends $1776. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, people can check the episode from Boston out. It has more in the title, just from exactly a week ago, actually, last Tuesday. And yeah, so we do not recognize the ideology of the Palestinians. Now
No,
there is
we do
there is the talk about the ceasefire, right? And one person that was talked about of potential being released is Marwan Barghouti, a guy who is in prison for, I don't know, like 50 consecutive life sentences or something like that, because of how much terrorism he did. He's one of the most popular, he is the most popular potential leader when it comes to Palestinians, more than Yahya Sinwar was, more than any Hamas leader was, and he is more radical than them. This is not just Hamas. It's not just Hamas that has imposed itself. It's the Palestinians. When you go to any polls, they are glad October 7 happened. They want to see more violence. They want to see more of killing Jews. This is not just something that is imposed on them by Hamas. It is Palestinians. So, yeah, I mean, and there's pretty much the whole conversation is about one question: how can we de-radicalize them? How can we simply separate them from Hamas? How can a solution be found without recognizing the ideas of the Palestinian people? Because if we don't, and even if occupation happens, right, which we say, the fact is, whatever occupation will happen will most likely not be done properly, and we'll be back to where we started. Anders?
Yeah, well, so history is messy, right? Whatever path this will go in, it will be messy. And we're looking back at World War II and the occupation and Japan and Germany and so on and so forth, and it turned out well, but it was messy. it was messy all along. So don't forget that.
Messy!
It's easy when we look back to history. Look at the American Revolution.
Greatest of all
It's
time.
amazing that this country ever came into existence. If you read about the details of the fights, the internal fights that took place between the end of the Revolutionary War and the Constitution was implemented. And you know, it has continued to this day. So history is messy. One comment back to what James said. I completely agree that Iran has to be taken out, and it's a disgrace that we were this close and didn't do it. But life is messy. Number two, voluntary relocation or letting them leave. Yeah, totally for that. Only one problem. Nobody wants them that I'm aware of, you know. We heard in the chat from the Cypriots, and I don't blame them. But so if anybody can find a place where they can voluntarily go, I'm all for it. But unless I missed it, I haven't seen anybody who has raised their hand. Thirdly, we're talking about the Palestinians, as you mentioned, and what should we do with their de-radicalization? And I read an article here a couple of days ago that actually I found very interesting. It brought to light some information that I was not aware of. We're treating Palestinians as this homogenous group. And this article was about a sheikh of Hebron on the West Bank.
Yeah, actually, we'll most likely talk about it either tomorrow or.
Okay, it's good, but it's worth mentioning. So
Yeah.
there are factions within the Palestinians on the West Bank, you know, where you have these tribal constellations, basically, each run by a little sheikhdom. And one or a couple of them have now proposed that they want to become their own little thing and join the Abraham Accord. You know, so there is probably an element of dividing and conquering here that could, because a lot of these people, especially on the West Bank, they hate the Palestinian Authority because, you know, they're ruling them and they're not part of their tribe within the larger Palestinian tribe, whatever that is. So I still think there are plenty of opportunities here to de-radicalize through, I mean, add divide and conquering as one part of it, and then you do the generational conflict between parents and kids, as we talked about, and so on and so forth. So I'm still an optimist. I think if the will is there from the Israelis, with or without support from the international community, and yes, it will be messy, it will be generational, but I still don't see any other option than an occupation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll definitely talk about the basically a bunch of sheiks in Hebron. Are proposing basically leaving the Palestinian Authority and recognizing Israel, which not even Palestinian Authority does, and basically trying to figure out some sort of situation with Israel to live side by side. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. And we sort of seen similar things happening. We've seen some families in Gaza saying they are standing up to Hamas. Now, my sort of, again, biggest problem with this is that this is even what Israel has been trying to do all the time in the territories. Is okay, we just find this, and well, the West, right? Oh, we'll just fund this mujahideen so we can fight the Soviet Union, right? We'll just ally with Saudi Arabia so we can fight Iran. And I'm concerned that this is exactly what it's going to be here, right? Again, we are allying ourselves with another sort of authoritarian state just so we can fight this other one, instead of like finally saying, okay, maybe we shouldn't deal with these terrorists. And I should also mention that, yeah, pretty much every Palestinian hates the Palestinian Authority, but it's because they consider them too appeasing of Israel of the times. That's why somebody like Marwan Barghouti, again, I want to find the exact number, but I think like over 50 life sentences he has for, again, conspiring and killing Jews. So yeah, Palestinians want more radicalism currently, not less. Now we also had Razi was supposed to be on the show, but he wasn't able. But he left us a few comments in the chat, so I'll read them. First, commenting on my first sentence, and some other people did. It's not a terrible thing to separate children from terrible parents. Yes, absolutely. On sort of like simple level, it's bad to separate children from their parents, but when you have this like genocidal culture, you are saving those children. The fact is, I remember, maybe you guys saw the story. There was one story about IDF soldiers in Gaza where a kid was sent to IDF camp, and the IDF soldiers like took them, fed them, and then sent him back. Basically, like send him back to that horrible culture. But of course, according to international community, if you take children, that's an act of genocide. So if Israel wanted to rescue those children, that would be viewed that way by the international community. Razi also said the Palestinians don't deserve occupation. They don't even deserve relocation. But if they get the latter, they're no longer Israel's problem. And on some level, absolutely. The fact is that if you fight a war, again, many people, especially in the modern age, sort of think of war as like it's this thing that sometimes happen and it's sort of okay, right? You try to find a ceasefire and then you move on with your life. Hopefully the status quo hasn't changed. Few people die, but that's okay. But the fact is, once a war is declared, that's a society telling, I want to destroy you. I don't care about civility. I don't care about dealing with you as humans. I'm basically just dealing with you like animals. I just want to slaughter all of you. That is not something that can sort of like be taken back.
Razi's position may be morally consistent on both of these points, but is there any hope in Hades that Israelis, much less Americans, would tolerate the separation of the children from their parents in our current culture? Even if Razi is morally correct that it's would be a humanitarian thing to separate kids from their ghastly, suicidal, encouraging suicide parents, even if that is morally correct, is there any chance in Hades that Israelis would do it? Forget the rest of the international community. Razi, I love you, Razi, but I just don't see something like that in the cards. In effect, would Israelis themselves say, okay, we'll just slaughter them until they truly surrender? No. And in this sense that even approaching things like that, the West does not have its moral backbone. Even Israel doesn't have the moral backbone to do anything even approaching Razi's suggestions there. I'm afraid we're in a different context. I think I'm much more along with Anders' situation. History is messy. The solution is going to be messy, and it's going to take time. And it's going to involve undoubtedly an occupation of at least a certain group of these Palestinians in Gaza. Would I favor, if there were a place to send them, would I favor removing them or allowing them to go to such a place? Yeah. Would I encourage that by any means possible? Yeah, I would do that as well. But in our current cultural context, Roz, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I want to go to you, Stuart, but I'll just add, when it comes to sort of the Israeli sentiment, I think it's about 50% of Israelis would support sort of military occupation of Gaza, and more than 50% want some sort of a deal for all the hostages. Now, on some level, the fact that Israeli government hasn't been doing what was necessary in Gaza, I think plays into that. Like when it comes to Iranian strikes, I think the support was like 90%. Now it's a different kind of operation, but when Israel was acting, the government was acting properly, the people seem to be there. I guess I'll add one more comment, then I'll go to you, Stuart. So Razi also said, Palestinianism is about one thing, killing every last Jew. How many Jews should Israel send to their death in its attempt to re-educate Palestinians to not want to kill all Jews. And on some level, you can find the parallels with the war, the fact of how many IDF soldiers had to die, again, to protect Palestinians. This was done, the whole operation was done in a way to protect as many Palestinians as they can, instead of protecting the lives of Israelis. Stuart?
Yeah, I want to echo Anders and James. I do think that as many Palestinians as want out should be gotten out. And it is a real problem, of course, that, who wants them. But I think, well, I don't think camps are the answer. I think, relocating and, yeah, it would cost money to get people set up in some foreign country, but every solution we're talking about costs money. And I think, it might be possible if you had a good plan in place to, find 20 countries that were willing each to take what would be 50,000 people to, and, get all the innocent ones out of there, basically. Everyone who wants a better life, get them out, help them find a better life. As James said, you're then left with the worst of the people, but then at least you know what you're dealing with. You're not getting as many innocents in the crossfire, and you can then have an occupation that is fairly strict and probably considered brutal by some standards, but if everybody who wanted out was able to get out, I certainly would feel a lot more morally good about whatever measures, were needed to make an occupation really work.
Yeah, I think, again, there's that problem of the fact that, if more people were like us, I think either solution would work. But the fact is, what you have currently on the ground, like what you said about, we let everybody go out, and then the people who stay, we can sort of impose something different because we know what kind of people would be willing to stay. But I feel like every Israeli prime minister has said that about every deal with Palestinians, right? Okay, we'll just give them Oslo Accords, and then if they go back, then we can just go fully in, right? We'll pull out of Gaza, and if they start shooting rockets, okay, now we can go fully in because now we know who they are. Same with the ceasefire, right? We'll just have one ceasefire, and then, and the fact is, it has never happened because this is not how it works. You can never get sort of out of the situation by compromising and then saying, okay, I'll just compromise now and I can apply principles later without any consequence, right? Once you compromise, you've already given into the principle. Once Israel allowed the establishment of UNRWA, once Israel allowed the establishment of PLO within the territories, once Israel had elections for the Palestinians and let Hamas run. Well, it was George Bush who wanted to have Hamas run, I believe. Once that happened, what are we doing? I think we're starting to run out of time, so I think I'll go for last thoughts. So James, can we really just do sort of, okay, we just give in this basically one last compromise of letting them get out instead of finally imposing something, and maybe then after that we'll go fully in, we'll finally do what is necessary? And also any other thoughts you might have.
A ceasefire and some kind of compromise that allows some new elections there, that is absolutely doomed to failure. If you are at all aware of the history of the area and you just adumbrated what recent decades have shown Israel in terms of compromising, making a deal with, allowing self-rule without any significant change occurring, is just a recipe for perpetual war, a recipe for more October 7th. So that is doomed. I hate to end my final thought to be on such a depressing note, because I think that something like that may be, if you were to ask me to take a bet at Las Vegas as to what I think is going to really actually happen, is that it'll probably be some kind of compromise settlement of that kind. And the compromise settlement of that kind means perpetual war for sure. It will only yield the same results as things like that have yielded in the past. I'm James Stevens Valiant. I'm active at Facebook almost every day answering questions. Please hit me up there. As I say, I hate to end on a sad note, but I really think that the most likely outcome at the end of the day here will be some sort of negotiated, quote, diplomatic compromise with the Gazans. And that means more death, more terrorism, perpetual war. Just as I don't see that we've solved the problem with Iran, and they were the ones funding Hezbollah, Shia militias, the Houthis, and Hamas. All that we've done is kick the can down the road, 2-3 years? Okay. So maybe when Trump's out of office, then they'll, really get aggressive again. That is not a solution, Mr. Trump. A negotiated ceasefire is not a solution, Mr. Netanyahu. But that, I fear, is precisely where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a compromise. Ceasefire is in the pipelines right now. I think I've read somewhere it might happen this week. We'll have to see. We'll also have to see what
Total
kind
elimination of Hamas
it is, if
does
it
not
truly
include a
does happen.
ceasefire.
We have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, I have a suggestion on where to send them. Mecca. I don't actually know how big Mecca is, but yeah, I mean,
The Saudi Arabian
desert
desert can
I'm
hold
sure
a
they would
million.
love to have Palestinians in.
Coffins.
Not. Somebody also said we gotta stop using World War II as an analogy for anything, let alone everything. Well, give me one war since World War II which we fought properly, and or give me even like historically like wars we fought properly. My go-to examples are American Civil War, the way it was waged by Sherman, and then World War II, mainly the bombing campaign, where we understood what needed to happen. We understood the concept of war. Since then, we didn't have a single example of that. So I'd love to have more examples. Humanity needs to provide me with one. Anders, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
2 words, occupy now.
Yeah.
You can find me on Substack, andersingemarson.substack.com, and my book, Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right, is available on Amazon.
Beautiful.
Stuart, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at also on Substack, Stuart.Margolis.substack, I think. And like James, I'm also on Facebook every day, so I can be reached there. Unfortunately, I do share James's pessimism. I mean, I think we are almost certainly going to just be kicking the can and dealing with this probably for the rest of my life, unfortunately. But I do think that in doing that, or in understanding that, we still have to keep in mind, especially as objectivists, that there are individual Palestinians out there that are decent people. So I do think we need to push for trying to find a way to get them out of there, and so that they can have decent lives. And even if it doesn't solve the whole situation in the region, it may solve their life. It may make their life better, and that's certainly a value. So I still think it's worth pushing for that.
And we have a super chat from Shona. Thank you so much. She says, Daniel, I meant calling everything Nazis. Well, I think that's a fair point to some extent, but also when, it quacks like a duck or quacks like a Nazi and walks like a Nazi, I think you should call it out for what it is, especially with the amount of anti-Semitism we are seeing. Currently, we talked about the death to the IDF chants, which are then used to actually attack synagogues and Israeli restaurants. So I understand about crying wolf, but sometimes there is actually a wolf that you need to cry for. With that, let me just remind people again about the Irreplaceable Spark Conference. Let's hear a little bit from Mark about it.
I played rebels, outlaws, and gods.
Who's
But
this?
nothing is more powerful than being the creator of your own life. So that's why I'm coming to the Irreplaceable Spark Conference. Not just to speak, but
Who's
to
this
coach.
guy?
Now, if you're ready to stop making excuses and stop bending a knee to mediocrity, I want to work with you.
Whoa.
This isn't for followers, okay? It's for the builders. It's for the risk takers. It's for the fire starters. If that's you,
Oh, that's not me.
I'll see you there.
No, no, that's not me at all. I don't start fires. Sorry, not me at all. But anyway, I just wanted to bring this Ayn Rand Centre UK to your attention. I've been following them for a while, and there's very little that I disagree with. They have, you know, the regulars, and then they have guests, different guests all the time. One of the regulars was not on there, Razzie, today, but I think I'm going to continue to present these shows because they do share my point of view. They're very rational, they're objectivist, and I find myself in that same boat. So Vaughn, Helton, and J-Dubs we haven't seen them for a day or two, but as soon as we do, I'll be back with them. Until then, we're done. See you next one. All right. It's the 8th of July, and it's a Tuesday.